ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 6 Month Promise podcast with Anthony Conceiso, the show where we talk to people from all walks of life, teens and adults pursuing their dreams, living one day at a time. If they have a story to share, then we have an ear to lend. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. You can also find us on SoundCloud under the 6 Month Promise podcast, and make sure you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, also under the 6 Month Promise podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the 6 Month Promise podcast with your host, Anthony Conceiso. Today I'm sitting down with the incredible Miss Emily Fenton. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So to start off, I kind of wanted to go back to before you even started cooking, before we even get into all that. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, growing up over in Massachusetts and Hingham, correctly? Mm-hmm. All right. So how was it? What was it like? Growing up with your family. What was your family like? What life like? How many siblings and things like that. So,
growing up, it was just me and my sister until I was 10, mm-hmm. and then we had my brother come along. Mm-hmm. We were homeschooled, so I spent a lot of time around them and around my family, mm-hmm. And they were incredible. Yeah. They were just supportive and loving and challenging, mm-hmm. But in ways that made me grow into who I am, and I wouldn't trade them for the world.
Was all of your family like into cooking, or was it just like a specific family members, or?
My mother would cook every night, mm-hmm. and she's really good at it. And my grandmother was really into cooking. She's actually the one who I typically will call and chat with about mm-hmm. whatever recipes I'm looking at and things like that. But food was always a part of our extended family's life. All of our big family get-togethers revolved around a huge meal. Mm-hmm. And so growing up, food was this concept of family. Yeah. They kind of became the same thing, mm-hmm. Because whenever you saw the family, we would eat whatever it was based on whatever holiday or birthday or get-together it was. And so it kind of melded food into my life, mm-hmm. and into my family, and forged these really cool bonds with my grandmother, because we would do all the grandkids would gather around and cook with her, mm-hmm. All of us, and we kept growing and growing, and so we had to find room for everybody, but everybody had to help make the appetizers and this and that, and it was just fun. Yeah.
Was your when it came to cooking things like that, a lot of, especially when you're young, most of the cooking does come from your ancestors and things like that. So were your parents from the United States? Were they immigrants at one point? What was the situation? What's your background, ethnicity per se?
Both of my parents were born in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And the family's immigrated a very long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So. But my mother is actually from Texas.
Oh, wow.
They moved up to Massachusetts when she was about 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so they brought the southern lifestyle with them. My grandfather was from Texas, and my grandmother was actually from Huntersville.
Oh, wow. That's right next door.
Exactly. But my father, his whole family had always been in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And so there were these two different food styles, mm-hmm. growing up. And almost kind of cultures, just from different parts of the same country.
Which one do you think you took more liking to?
My mother.
Your mother's.
I love my dad, but the southern lifestyle was a little more.
In food wise, would you say the same thing? You liked if you were to think back, what was something you really enjoyed eating that your mom would make when you were younger?
I remember constantly. We would have red beans and cornbread, which you would not find in a typical New England home. And we would eat it at least once a week, and it was just so good. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Was there when you started cooking, was there a piece of you that wanted, because now especially with the conversation that we've been having previously, you mostly focus a lot of your time into pastry and baking and things like that, but was there a point when you kind of thought that maybe going into the southern style food and everything like that when you were younger was something you were more interested into or akin to?
No, I never thought about going to the culinary side versus the pastry side. Mm-hmm. And part of that's because of my personality. I'm a very organized and set type of person.
Yeah.
And with your cooking, culinary side, it's more of kind of a, there is precision, but it's not to the same level.
Yeah.
Whereas with pastries, like breads or cakes or whatever, if you don't do everything to the exact T, it's not going to work. And that's what really drew me in about that, was the fact that it was so put together and so easy to follow. But at the same time, I learned different things, so I could start experimenting on my own and do different things within the realms of what I knew was possible.
So, like, before we get into you got into cooking and things like that, like, what were you like, as a child? Were you like into extracurricular activities? What type of thing were you into? Like, were you artistic? Were you more musical? Like,
my sister decided that she wanted piano lessons, and so my mother decided that we were both going to get piano lessons.
How old were you at around this time?
I was about 10.
10, okay.
About 10. And I told my mother I didn't want piano lessons. And a year later, my sister quit piano lessons, and I kept going through high school. So I did that for a long time. I also picked up fencing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did that. I started doing that when I was 11 and competed at the national level. I was ranked 67th in the country for girls ages 11 and 12. And it was a lot of fun.
Goodness gracious. Fencing is not something that you easily find yourself into. Like, what brought fencing, like, into the picture?
There was a homeschool group that was doing a demonstration at a library near us, and we went to go see it, and I got really excited about it, and one of my other friends did as well, and we had a fencing club that was near us. And so we started going there, and it wound up shutting down due to lack of interest. And so my father started driving me an hour away every Thursday to be able to go to my fencing lessons and just do everything.
Goodness gracious.
And it was a lot of fun.
Wow.
So I did like weird extracurriculars. I have like a normal piano, and then I have sword fighting. So you never know where I'm going to go.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, goodness gracious. Do you think was there a point when you were like, I don't want to do this anymore, or did you think you could possibly even keep going? Like, what caused you to stop?
The distance is what caused us to stop. It was just a lot. Because at that point, I was starting high school, and I was a little crazy and decided that I was going to overload with extra courses to be able to have more time to work in the field when I got to my senior year. So my senior year of high school, I took 2 courses, and I took 13 my freshman year and 12 my sophomore year.
Oh my God.
So I didn't have time for it anymore.
Yeah. What was the social life like? If any, goodness gracious, that's a lot on your plate for a young girl like that.
Thankfully, I was a very organized person, and so I could time schedule everything very well. And I had a decent social life, but it wasn't my focus.
Yeah.
So I would have certain times of the week where I would go to different groups or things like that, but I spent a lot of time studying and a lot of time around my family. My family was my main social life for all that time.
And I feel like that's really, really good. I can definitely resonate with that, coming from my background and having that thing. I feel like being surrounded by family, especially when you have a focused mindset, is really, really good. But it's also funny because when you listen to people who go into culinary, they're typically like very like, I was always bouncing off the walls and things like that. And I feel like people with baking have to be the sort of person who could stick to things like that. So being able to be like that at such a young age, amazing. Just wow. I'm totally a little bit taken back, actually. That's one thing that was, I told you this a little bit earlier, but one thing that was so excited was because I knew that there was definitely more to you than I probably initially knew. We don't really know each other that well. We recently just met. But yeah, that's why I was so excited to get you on the show, because I was like, wow, there's definitely probably more to this person that I didn't expect. But so at what point, as you're growing up, you start going into baking more than anything. So what kind of introduced baking to you at that early age?
The family get-togethers. That was the part that I really liked. And so my mom would help me make cookies or the pie or whatever it was that I wanted to do for the family get-together. Because everybody would bring some sort of side dish and everybody would bring a dessert. That's just always how it was. And so we'd have all these desserts spread out, and it was a chance to try something different for me and to do things. And that slowly melded into, I found out how much I really loved the precision of it, and I started to bake more often than just the family get-togethers. I would do cookies or I would do this. And then I had an opportunity where my father was doing visits with the leaders of our church to different homes of people in our church, and they wanted to bring baked goods with them. And so they said, hey, you want to make them? And so every week I would make something new and send it off with them. And it was a cool opportunity to start to really figure out whether I liked it or not. And I found that I loved it.
Well, what was like, you talking about like, you know, making these things and getting to the point where you're like loving it. At what point what was your favorite thing about like the cooking? Was it knowing that it was your finished product and that was something that you put into, like your work into, or was it the part of like seeing their reactions of eating it and enjoying it? Like what was something that just made you be like, I want this feeling for like ever?
Definitely the process of it and the feelings that I got actually making it. Because when I really started to do my delving into pastry when I was younger, I didn't see them eat it. I would send it off with somebody else, and so I wouldn't see that. And so that didn't connect with me. It does now in a different way.
That's
but
great, though.
Just the satisfaction of having done it. And it's, for me, baking is also a de-stressor. So as I was going through, you know, teenage years are rough.
Yeah, they
you
can
know,
be very
you
rough,
have different things going on, and you're trying to figure out this, and you have to figure out what you want to do with your life. And for me, it was an outlet to be able to just focus on something else and be good at it, and then enjoy what I got out of it, which was a final baked product. And so it almost became like addictive because I liked that. And so I started doing it more and more. And then I said, okay, I want to go to culinary school and study baking. And my parents said, okay.
Do you remember what that moment was like when you like kind of just looked around and you were like, this is the one? Do you remember that at all?
I don't, because it was pretty gradual. It kind of felt like, and this is going to sound really cheesy, but it kind of felt like I always knew that that's where I was going to go. And as I got older and started praying about what I needed to do, where I was being called, it became very clear that that's where God was leading me, and that was going to be what he had in store.
So like, that's one thing that's like really, really cool though, is the idea of like not having that reaction of like, oh, do they like it, and not being able to see that. I feel like if in a way it would help you, because one thing that I could totally tell, especially with like when I cook from time to time, occasional times that I do, is definitely seeing the person's reactions, like, oh, did they like it or did they not. So building that sort of like layer of like, you know what, I know that I put in my hard work into this, and I know it's going to be this way, and I know it's good, and you not even having to worry about seeing that, I feel like as a child that would just completely take away this like sort of like idea and feeling of like, wow, I really need to please this person, things like that. So that's amazing. That's wonderful that you kind of were able to sort of start that. But so like going in, wanting sort of to start going into baking, what was like your goal back then? Like when you thought of like, this is what I'm going to do, like what was the dream? What was the idea?
I was going to own my own bakery, and it was going to be called the Crumb Shop. And it very specifically was going to be spelled S-H-O-P-P-E. Very specific. I was so dedicated to the idea that for Christmas one year, my aunt had a stamp made, and whenever I would make a product, I could put a little sticker with a stamp on it that said the Crumb Shop. I think I still have that somewhere, actually, now that I think about it. And it was just really cool. So I always wanted to own my own bakery when I was little, and as I started to get further and further into the industry, it started changing. But that was the kickstart.
That was the beginning, was the
Shop.
idea of you and your little baking gear and all that with the Crumb Shop. That is beautiful. That's really, really funny, actually. So as you go along, you know, you're going into high school and things like that. Like so when you finished high school, you go into, did you go straight to culinary school? Did you go to college? What was that all about?
So my junior and senior year of high school were very dedicated to the purpose of getting me into one very specific school. And one of the requirements that they had was a minimum of 6 months of kitchen experience in a qualifying kitchen. And so I started searching for a job, and I happened to find one at it was a restaurant that was within an inn, about 35 minutes away from where my parents and I were living. And it was a fine dining style restaurant. And they hired me first as a host, and then brought me into the kitchen so that I could bake for them. And they didn't have a pastry chef. They didn't have a specific pastry program, and so I got to work very closely with the chef on what recipes we were going to use and different things like that, and I got my first experience that way.
Goodness gracious.
Then I applied to school, and I got in, which I was very happy about.
Which school did you apply to?
The Culinary Institute of America. It's in Hyde Park, New York.
Yeah. Very well known indeed.
Yeah. So I went there and I started my associate's degree because they divide it up in two ways. You have your associate's degree, which is your actual kitchen training. So for the first 2 years, I was wearing chef whites 5 days a week and working in the kitchens. Our classes, you either had morning or night classes, and the night classes would start at 2 p.m. and go until 10 p.m. And so you'd be baking that entire time and learning different techniques and products and the culture behind different pastries that we're looking at, and slowly building on everything. And that time in school, for that, they do it in a weird, but kind of cool system where you take one kitchen class at a time that's 3 weeks long. And then you take 2 academic classes with it that are 6 weeks long. And so they have it set up in this, they call it a block system. And so it kind of speeds up the learning. And then moving past that, they had us do what was called an externship, and it's basically an internship. And it was a really cool opportunity. I wound up going to Cape Cod, that is right off Massachusetts, or part of Massachusetts technically. And I worked in a fine dining Asian fusion restaurant that was high production. Literally on the ocean. You could see the ocean from the door that we took deliveries in the kitchen.
Oh my goodness.
And I got to work with some incredible people. I wound up meeting my college roommate while I was there, and it was just an incredible time. So much learning and so much cool food that I hadn't been exposed to. Because blending the Asian culture foods with our foods wasn't something I'd been exposed to outside of a little bit at school, but not a ton. And so that was a really cool opportunity.
Do you think that at any point, I know because you already said that, at no point that you wanted to start going into culinary, but do you think that maybe started possibly ever swaying you to be interested in that, and then you kind of just went back to baking? Or
I use a lot of those techniques that I learned there from the chefs in my personal cooking. So it's not uncommon for me to have Asian fusion in my own kitchen. It's kind of weird when I'm cooking for myself. I either tend to lean towards Tex-Mex or Asian. It's kind of a very weird pantry that I have.
Do you ever try playing and blending with the two?
Every once in a while, I'll go a little crazy.
Anything good come out of it?
I've done some interesting Asian fusion tacos. So.
Ooh, that sounds actually really good. I am a big taco person, so when it comes to things like that, I always like playing with tacos.
Exactly.
Man, Asian fusion tacos. Wow, but what an amazing gig. I mean, how long were you there for?
I did my first stint there it was a 15-week externship, and then I went back to school for the second half of my associate's degree, graduated, and went back there for the summer, because they have you graduate from the associates and then return if you want to complete the bachelor's degree, and that's what I was doing. So I went back there for another 6 months or so, and then went back to school after that. And then that time in school was about 1.5 years long, and it was academic courses as well as a couple kitchen courses, but not many. It was more focused on management and costing and understanding food at a better level. I took multiple courses in beverage management, wine studies, understanding how wine is made, understanding how beer is made, understanding how the different spirits are made and what you can do with those, and just kind of getting a bigger and broader picture of what the industry was.
Do you consider yourself a wine or beer person at all? Are you into drinking on a social gathering type of thing? Like, what would you say, alcohol wise? What do you think you're like?
Probably people don't like to consume alcohol with me because I sit there and analyze it, because that's what I've been trained to do. I've been trained to sit there and figure out, okay, where's this wine from? What is the grape? What acidity levels and different things about it. And to a certain degree, I can do that with beer and liquor as well. But wine's where I really understand it.
You shine.
And so I find it fascinating. And so it's more of an intellectual experience than a actual taste experience.
Goodness, but that's amazing though. That's awesome. I one of the things that I don't understand wine at all. I come from people who do though. A lot of the people that I surround myself with, they're always like, oh well, you have to understand this and this and this, and it always baffles my mind. So like being able to sit with somebody that knows that much about it would just be amazing. So definitely need to look out for that when I turn 21. but so you go into cooking. Was there ever a point when you ever thought maybe you didn't want to go into the food industry? Like, was there a point when you were like, maybe I could go into this or that? And I'm smiling, so I'm guessing there's a good story behind this.
I was finishing my bachelor's degree, and I was taking accounting classes. And I had taken an accounting class in high school and enjoyed it. And I became obsessed with this idea that we needed accountants who actually understood what is going on in a kitchen.
In the kitchen,
And so I started pursuing a master's degree in accounting. And I applied to multiple schools, and I got in, but I had moved myself to Charlotte for my job. And the way that the schedules would work for school just wouldn't fit with because my hours are all over the place. It's always changing. And with classes like that, they're actually, the quality programs are, you have to sit and do a live stream of a class. It's virtual. And so you have to be at the same time each week, which just doesn't work for me. So I turned down the offers that I had and have been kind of figuring things out. But I really enjoy where I'm at right now, and so I think
with baking, you don't think you'll ever go back to thinking that way again, or at least
I never say never, because there's always that part of me that likes the numbers, and I have opportunities to work with that in the job that I'm in, so that's part of why I like it. But there's something about that calls to me as well. But yeah, I definitely had a solid year and a half of pursuing something else.
Wow, and I feel like a lot of it's especially when chefs go into, or anybody that wants to go into any sort of form of culinary or food whatsoever, they always sort of like, this is it, like it's either this or nothing. So the idea of putting numbers and wanting to do that is just very smart. Also, if you want to own your own place, that's something that I feel like a lot of people look over. They don't think about these type of things before they go into something like that. So you were almost preparing yourself for a certain job before you were even really thinking about it, going full on to that. So that's great. But now I'm really excited about getting into this topic. So you got an opportunity to go overseas.
Yes.
Paint the picture. How old?
So I was 21, and it was actually mandated by the bachelor's program that I was in. All bachelor's students were required to go on what was called the Global Cuisines and Culture trip. And so it was a 3-week-long excursion. You had to pick between Italy, France, Peru, China, or Spain. And I chose Italy. And so I went with about 20 other students from my school. And we spent 3 weeks touring farms and wineries and the vineyards and just bake shops, going into the kitchens of Michelin star restaurants that are in Italy.
Wow.
I mean, incredible opportunities that you would never have without the connections that the school had. And it was amazing. The food that I encountered was I still remember it. It was a sous vide boar meatball over potato pasta that they had made. with this gorgeous sauce on top and everything. And we were sitting on this patio overlooking rolling hills and vineyards in the middle of southern Italy. And it was the most incredible dish I've ever eaten in my life. And I've had some great food, but that one is by far the best.
Always going to be
the flavors, the tenderness, the textures, the setting that I was in, sitting there in this gorgeous weather in spring, because we went in April. And so it's beautiful weather. You can see for miles, and it's just incredible. And so it was different experiences like that of walking through a winery, not just to do a tasting, but we went into where they actually produced the wine, and we got to see what they were working on and how they use their equipment and how they store it and the oak barrels that they use, and then what they feel about this and what they feel about that. And we would do that every day. And just see all these different techniques and thought processes, because nobody does anything the same. And so it really opened all of our eyes to the fact that there is no one way to do something, and you can produce an incredible product throughout different methods, and it's all about finding the one that works for you.
That's amazing. Well, okay, let's run me through one day there. What would your typical day there while you were there be like?
So the pretty much typical day was we would all get up and we would all eat breakfast and kind of just talk about what we've been seeing and whatnot. Or finish up some of the assignments, because even while we were doing this, we had papers on what we were experiencing, different things that we had to complete.
So it was very much like, you're still doing schoolwork and things like that.
Oh, yeah. I wrote 6 different papers on, we had to pick different things, and there were other topics, and so we were constantly writing and journaling and trying to communicate what we were experiencing and what we were going to take away from it. Because it's meant to be an exposure trip to make you understand the world of food better. And so we'd get up and we'd eat and we'd try and finish up whatever we could, and then we'd all get on this bus and we would go to our first location, which typically would either be a restaurant that we were going to tour or a farm. And we would go through and we would either be seeing what they're doing in the restaurant, what their methods are, or we'd be going through the farm and how they're caring for the animals, how they think that they're positively impacting the quality of the milk or the cheese or the meat that they're producing. We went to a whole bunch of different factories that produced hard-pressed meats, and so we got to see those different processes. And then we'd go for a lunch, and we would eat and we would discuss with the chef. The chef would come out to the table and he'd sit down, and either they spoke English or we had a translator that was with us, and we would converse on the food and the experience and their wisdom, and we would get to ask them questions about, well, what about this, and have you ever experienced that? And so you have all these people that you've never met before that you're drawing information from. And then we'd go on, usually a tour of a winery would be in the afternoon, and we'd go through and we'd see the vineyards, and then we'd see where they're producing it, and they'd talk us through their process and what they're currently producing. And then we do a tasting to help understand what they have produced, and how it compares to the soil content for, minerality and things like that. And it was a very fascinating process. And then we'd go for another dinner with chefs sitting down and talking with us, and people that we could draw from, and just incredible food experiences. And then after that, we would have the rest of the night free to ourselves, and we would go explore. And we would go find gelato or pizza or, whatever it was that we were looking to experience that day. And the different places that we would go, because we went to 3 different cities while we were there. And so we'd have a few days in each place.
Which cities were they?
We went to Rome, Salerno, and then we were in Puglia as well. And it was phenomenal.
Goodness.
And so you'd have enough time to be able to kind of explore, but you never got truly comfortable. Because then you'd be off to the next place, and you're exploring again and seeing this and seeing that. But it was a lot of fun.
Was there, and I know this might be a little bit of a specific question, was there anything that was said to you by, because you get to sit down with these, if you're going to Michelin levels, restaurants, you're sitting down with Michelin levels chefs, and goodness gracious, in the food industry, these are the rock stars, So when you sit down, was there anything that was said to you that you can maybe remember and you just always kind of stay with you? Was there any experience with the chef that you remember?
Not with specific ones, but it's fascinating to me, and what hit me was how they all have this overarching theme, and they would go about it in different ways. But the general message that all of them would say is, if you put your passion into the food, the people will feel it. And that's something that I had heard at school and I had experienced in restaurants, but to hear it said over and over and over again by the successful people of my industry was incredible. Because it's not just about putting together a plate, it's not just about making a number or whatever, it's about making sure that you're putting your heart and soul into what you're producing.
Goodness gracious. Wow. I mean, what an experiment. I mean, wow. Goodness gracious. I can't even begin to fathom how amazing that must have felt being that young and being able to be into these different, areas and getting to taste all these amazing things. Like, goodness gracious. Is there any, so the group of people that went there with you, do you keep in touch with any of them at all?
There's a couple of them that I'm still in contact with over Facebook.
Did you meet anybody there while you were there that you still keep in touch with at all?
Not closely. Most of my relationships from there are pretty distant, but part of that is because when we all graduated, we all went across the globe. I have people that I went to Italy with in San Diego. There are people that are off in Alaska. There are people that are currently studying under chefs in foreign countries. And so it's hard to, when everybody just dispersed, it was hard for everybody to keep in touch. So there is still a Facebook group where every once in a while someone will post something, but it's kind of more of a memory than a true connection at this point.
Is there, like, besides that one meal, obviously, that will always be with you, which is amazing, was there another moment when you just felt like this moment is always, like, a wonderful memory of being there that just always stayed with you besides the meal, or was that really the best moment you had there?
The other moment that really stuck out to me was we went to a buffalo farm, and they do the buffalo mozzarella, and then there was a gelatery nearby that used that milk to produce buffalo gelato. And going down and touring with all these giant animals was really cool. And so that and that meal probably stick out to me the most. Just walking through and seeing all these buffalo and how they're living and what they're doing, and then seeing them going inside to where they're actually producing the cheese and seeing how they're doing that, and getting to walk right on up to the machines where they're stirring around the curds and just be there in a way that studying it can never do. It's different to see it as opposed to just watch a video about it or something. And then finally going down, and we all drove down. They took the bus down to the gelatery so that everybody could try the buffalo gelato, so that we all could understand what it was.
Oh wow, that's awesome! Goodness, so. After that amazing trip and everything that you're exposed to over there, what was it like coming back home and going back into the routine of things? How did that trip affect you on your way back here, like coming back here and trying to get back into the rhythm of things here?
I think it was interesting that it happened right around the time I was thinking about leaving the industry, and I think it kind of helped me stay connected. I think that if I hadn't experienced that, I might now be an accountant. I might have pursued it a little harder.
Yeah, that feels like a last call back to to your reality, if anything, right?
Exactly, because it was a semester before I graduated, and I just started down my path of, I really like accounting and whatnot, but it reminded me of the passion and the ultimate goal of what food industry is, because there's a lot of things that get lost in translation, and sometimes you just have to hear it over again of, it's about passion and it's about love. It's about putting yourself on a plate. And so I think that really kind of made it possible for me to remember why I liked what I was doing, and to really focus in on what I wanted as a result.
Would you say, is there anybody that, like, when you're working hard into something, and is there somebody in mind that you're always like, I'm doing this because of, is it the love of food, or is there somebody that you're working hard for, something that you want to reach that goal for?
It probably, if I'm really thinking about it, on a subconscious level, it's always about my mother and my grandmother. It's my connection to them that I feel really strongly. My favorite cookbook that I use all the time, it's called the Test Kitchen's Family Baking Book. And my grandmother has the exact same one. And so we constantly use recipes from it all the time. And my mother used to use recipes from it because I had a copy of it. Even now, I'll send her pictures of recipes from it and whatnot. And so, food and family and food and life always kind of blend together with me. And so whenever I'm doing something baking related, or I'm just doing something that I love within the industry, there's always that connection to them. And so it kind of brings me back to Massachusetts and back to everybody that I care about.
Not to take us off too much, but what was it like when you told them, that you wanted to go into the food industry and going to having that conversation? What was it like with your mom and your grandma?
It was just kind of a normal, there was no big moment. It was just, I want to do this. And they're like, okay, think about it, figure it out. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And so they would, just like they did with my sister, when she was thinking about what she wanted to do, they would just kind of poke questions of, well, what about this? And, well, what about that?
Well, they kind of have to groom
kind of
you.
help make sure that I actually know what I'm talking about. But there was never a moment where they were like, are you sure about that? Because they knew how much I loved it, and they know how much it means to me. And so they worked hard to make sure that I had the mental ability to be there and to do it. And now I am. That's cool.
So you come back from Italy, and now you're you're getting ready and things like that. So what happens next? So you went back into schooling, you finished out, I'm guessing, culinary school and everything like that, right?
Yep. So while I was finishing my culinary school, they had career fairs there. And the company that I now work for, Hickory Tavern, came up recruiting. And I had it in my mind that I was going to move to Texas and get my accounting degree and move on. And God said no. He said, you're going to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, and you're going to work for this chain that you've never heard of before. And so they came up and they were recruiting, and I accepted a position with them. And I graduated in December. And by January 10th, I think it was, I moved myself down to North Carolina from Massachusetts. So I went home and I did the holidays with my family, and then we packed up everything into a truck, and my dad and I drove it down here. And I started my actual career part of food.
So you come down in Hickory Tavern. Did you start in the kitchen? I know that now you are no longer working really in the kitchen, but did you start back there and then work your way out? How did that play out?
They started me as an assistant kitchen manager. So it was me and one other kitchen manager working together to run the kitchen. After some shuffling around, I moved out front because Hickory Tavern doesn't have a pastry program. They bring in and they very carefully source their pastries. That's one thing that I really liked about them. Their desserts are actually really good, and I like them. And as a pastry cook, that was something that was important to me. But I actually had applied for a front of house position because throughout my bachelor's degree, I'd gotten more acquainted with that and things like that, and I enjoy the people. I get a lot of pleasure out of getting to work with the guests and work with the servers and make those connections. So I started off as an assistant kitchen manager, and then they moved me out front as a service manager, and then I was transferred to another location as the bar manager, and now I do the training as well as running the bar. So it's a lot of fun, and it kind of was a good segue into what I'm doing now, where it got me familiar because I'm used to kitchens. Even though I don't do the pure culinary side of it, I'm used to that feel, and so it was a great opportunity for me to kind of become acquainted with the concept and what I was doing, and a new area that I'd never been to before, and kind of ease myself into it.
Oh, wow. Do you think, as you move forward and things like that, I feel like being in the front of house and seeing the way things are working out, do you think with the experience that you have now, going later into the future, do you think you are now more prone to making that initial goal of, having the shop and doing all that, do you think that's something that now you feel like it could possibly even be in the future for you now?
I don't know. People ask me what my 5-year plan is and stuff like that, and I don't have a very specific one. My goal right now is to become the best that I can be in the position that I'm in, and to grow and develop, and wherever that leads, it will lead. And I'm just kind of, I don't know if I ever want to own my own shop, or if I don't. It's just kind of a moment by moment process, and it's kind of cool to not feel the pressure of I have to accomplish this. I'm just enjoying what I'm able to do with food and with people and with service and hospitality, and it's
in the sense, would you say,
exciting
not to cut you off, but in the sense, would you say that this is the first time you sort of feel this way of like you're not feeling the pressure because in school it's like, well, you gotta study for this thing and then you gotta do that, and so would you say that this is the first time you're ever feeling like you don't have that thing of like, well, I gotta like make sure this goes well for that, and so like how do you feel about that?
I think it's really cool. There are unique pressures that each day in the industry brings, but I think it's cool to be able to just focus in on what I'm doing right now and grow and develop that, rather than be so focused on achieving something else that I fail to learn something that I could. Because everybody has different opportunities and everybody has different goals, and if you're so focused on your goal, you're going to lose track of what you could possibly learn at the spot where you're currently at. And so I think there's a element to which I'm growing faster as a person and as a professional, because I'm able to really focus in on just what I'm doing.
Right now, where you stand with everything that with all the experiences that you went through, when you were younger and you made that decision of like, this is what I want to do, is there anything you would tell that young Emily, keep this in mind or something like that? Was there anything that you would want to warn yourself or tell yourself?
I don't think so. I think that if I knew where I would be now, I wouldn't have followed as closely as I did. I think that by constantly going through different situations and it taking me down kind of the winding path rather than the A to B point, it helped grow me better as a person, and as a professional. And I think that each experience was fantastic, and I liked being surprised by them all, so I wouldn't want to take that away.
Well, Miss Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope everything works out for you. With such an amazing background that you have, I definitely wasn't expecting it to be this way, and I'm so beyond pleasantly surprised. I have no doubt that you're going to be able to go into amazing things into your future, and I think that you're just beginning an amazing journey. I really, truly say that. I don't typically say that, but I truly, really do mean that. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And yeah.
Awesome.